Hi and welcome to our program. Today Jonas Bach is going to show us around Gellerup while telling us about its past, present and a little bit about the future. Let's check it out. Hi Jonas!
Hi.
How are you doing?
Good, thanks. You?
Perfect. Thank you so much for having us. So where are we?
We are in Gellerup. We are at what some of the residents call the nordiske fredsplads, like the plaza of earthly peace.
So this was is more central?
Yeah, it's kind of central because you have the shopping center right down here, City West, and there are the old communal buildings of the estate are here. The library used to be over here. There used to be a lot of communal functions around here, and there still are, of course. There's a church here behind us. And here is going to be a new folk high school, maybe. And all these buildings were built to house communal functions in the original design of the Gellerup estate.
Okay. Were this the first buildings? Was this kind of the core?
No, it was kind of the core. It was the core of service facilities for the estate. But the thing about Gellerup is kind of the core is kind of
everything.
The park area, I guess, which we'll see soon as well. We'll walk to the park area and we'll see parts of the new Gellerup and parts of the old Gellerup, and also Tours, which is the neighboring estate.
So even though this changed a little bit the functions, it's still the communal area kind of.
Yeah, it's still kind of central in some ways, though a lot of the functions have disappeared now because the library has moved, and we'll pass that as well. The new library. Right now, there's this entrepreneurial hub in the floors above, but it used in the early days there was like a hotel here where people who were visiting family or friends here could stay at the hotel. There used to be a jazz club. There's a large stage underneath this building called Gellerup Scene.
Is it being used somehow now?
Yeah, it is still being used at times. Actually, right below us is also the place where the local circus project Uge22 used to train. They've also moved. So there's a lot of things actually down below here. There's also a billiards club. I had no idea. So there's a lot of things beneath here. And a lot of things will also be happening here, I think, because right now there's a lot of discussions about what will happen to these buildings. Okay. And as you can see, they're not up to date. But there are plans to maybe make this into Gellerup Højskole. As you can see here, the sign here is saying Højskole and Forsamlingshus. So that's kind of an attempt to build on some of the traditional Danish ideas of educating people and bringing people together about knowledge and about singing, about different kinds of activities, about
something that is more like typical Danish.
Yeah, more typical Danish in a way, but also drawing on some of the qualities of the estate. But it's a project that will be decided on whether it will be realized this year. So it's going to be interesting what will happen.
And why was there so many different facilities here? What was the goal with this?
Yeah, the goal was when Gellerup was built, it was built as a place that could where you could spend your whole life basically from cradle to grave. And the idea was that you went out to work, and when you came back, you had everything you needed here. So there was shopping, there was the park area with playgrounds for the kids. There was no traffic, no motorized traffic going through the estate, so the kids could play out without their parents being worried about them being run over by cars. And then there were all these facilities here. So you didn't really have to go anywhere else than here. So that was part of the idea of the architects who designed this place, was that they wanted everything you needed to be here.
And as we were talking before, so what happened to these facilities?
Yeah.
Why did they disappear?
Yeah, I think part of it was connected to the general development of the place, because in the 70s a lot of things happened in Danish society. There were some changes in the regulations about the possibility of loaning to buy a house. There was an oil crisis. There were a lot of things happening both in Aarhus but also in Denmark in general.
Okay.
And part of this development meant that a lot of people didn't move here as the planners thought. A lot of people would move here, but then a lot of people bought a house instead, like a detached house with a garden.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
For how many people was this designed at the beginning?
Actually, the plan was to build even more than is actually built. But I think the original plan was to house somewhere around 8,000 people.
Okay. And that was not happening in the 70s?
I think in the 70s, 80s, 90s, maybe around between 7,000 and 8,000 people lived here.
Okay.
But then at times there were dropping numbers of residents and there were empty apartments. And part of what also happens was that the municipality has the right to refer every fourth available apartment to people who are in
because it's non-profit.
Because it's non-profit housing.
Okay, maybe you can also explain what non-profit housing means.
Yes, yeah, but it means non-profit housing. Non-profit housing in Denmark is run by housing associations, which are associations. That means that they're membership-based, and you can have a membership for like 150 kroner a year.
That's quite acceptable.
Yeah, it's quite acceptable. And they're run on a non-profit basis. That means that the profit they make from running the housing units, they reinvest that in the units or in new housing units. So the idea is that it's not the point to make a surplus of money. The point is to make good quality housing, which is available for everyone. I think that the general idea is good quality housing at affordable prices, and the whole movement of the Danish Housing Associations already began before the Second World War, but it's been kind of after the Second World War they built many of the large estates that we call ghettos now in Denmark. And Gellerup was one of them. But a lot of housing estates, non-profit housing estates, were built in the 50s, 60s and 70s. Okay.
And you touched the ghetto,
the ghetto
subject. So what is considered a ghetto? Like, what's the definition?
Well, the definition is based on 5 criteria. And the criteria mainly relate to income and educational levels and employment rates, and then there's those 3 criteria are kind of connected in many ways, because if you have a high education and you have a job, you have a high income. But they're like 3 separate criteria. Then there's a criteria about the number of convicted adults. Or adults that are convicted by the penal code. And that kind of changes with the average number of convicted adults in Denmark, which is something like 0.6 or 0.7, I think. So the limit for that is like around 2% now, I think.
Okay. And you happen to know how much is it now, or when you were studying it?
It's been around 2.5% here.
Okay, so it's
been higher than that. And the 5th criteria is the ethnicity criteria, where if there's more than 40 or 50% with non-Western background living in an estate, that also counts as one of the criteria.
Yeah. Do you have any idea why these criteria are criteria? Like, what made people decide these were the criteria to call something a ghetto?
I think part of it is that the reason why we've been pointing out these places as ghettos as a society, it's a political decision, and it's a decision that is also based on an idea that some of these places are socially marginalized. that it's a particular group of people who live there, and that they don't have the resources to help each other up.
Okay.
So when you have these concentrations of people who are unemployed, who don't have education or longer educations, who might have a different background than Danish, who maybe they don't speak or read Danish, then that's problematic when there's too many of them.
And why is that?
Because then they can't be, I think the blunt reply would be that they can't be productive citizens that generate tax income. Because to do that you need to have a job, and you need to contribute to society. So I think that's part of the idea of this, is that you want a larger portion of the people living in these places to be active citizens and to contribute in the job market and contribute with taxes and so on.
And that's why they are trying to get rid of these ghettos, right? Like politicians, especially.
Yeah, and it's well, there's a lot of goals involved in this, because some of it is also like is used as in development policies for cities. Like Aarhus is also thinking strategically, what can we do with a place like Gellerup? What types of buildings, which types of citizens would we like to have living in a place like this? But there's also, of course, an idea that you can solve, or at least get closer to solving some of the social issues that I hear, that people don't get jobs, that people don't get educations, that some of the kids don't get their school exams, that they might end up in crime and so on. So part of the idea is also to prevent that for the future generations. But of course, it's also, there's a lot of discussion about whether this is the right way of doing it, or whether you should be more based on social efforts, or efforts that are directed at the individuals who are the problems, or who are considered problematic. So there's a lot of discussion about whether this will work, and no one really knows. But part of the logic is that if you mix people socially, then there will be a larger chance that civil society, like you can help your neighbor. If you are a CEO of a company, you might hire your neighbor who is unemployed for a job in your company, and so on. So there's this idea that if you have what we call resourceful citizens, they can help the people who don't have as many resources. And then society or the state doesn't have to do it, because it's expensive.
Yeah. And this that we are talking about now is the comprehensive plan of Gellerup. So what else can you tell us
about the plan?
About the plan itself?
Yeah, well, the plan is quite comprehensive, as you say. Well, the plan has had like several iterations. So when they started talking about this was probably in 2006-07 that the first like really serious discussions about making these major changes to the Gellerup estate. They started being discussed, and at that time there was like a crime wave also in Gellerup. There was a kindergarten that was burned down, which was like what pushed the decision in the end, I think. There were a lot of. There was also at the time where there were these riots in Paris, in the banlieues of Paris, and I think a lot of politicians looked towards that and said, we don't want that in Denmark. We want
calm and peace.
Calm and peace, and we want to integrate people, and we want to help people move into society and not be isolated in suburbs away from everything else. So that was part of the logic, at least. And then also because the buildings, now you can see this building has not been renovated on the outside for ages. But if you look towards the building behind us, which is an apartment building, that was actually renovated. So that's also been part of the plan, was like bringing the original apartments more up to date. And also by mixing kinds of tenure, so that it wouldn't just be non-profit housing, but also be owned houses or private rental units, so that you get a different mix of people
Okay. And that was kind of one of the solutions.
Yeah, that was one of the solutions.
This social mix that we were explaining.
Yeah, exactly. So it is. We'll see when we move through the estate. Is that we'll see new housing units that are built by either private entrepreneurs or also in some cases by the housing associations. But that are built in a different style and directed at a different audience, smaller apartment sizes. Many of the apartments in the old Gellerup were quite big, which also meant was part of the reason why there's quite a lot of families with many children here, because that's one of the places where you can find a 5-room apartment.
That is acceptable. The price is affordable.
Well, the price is affordable. So it's also there's also this idea that what is attractive on the Aarhus housing market is 2- and 3-room apartments, which are directed at like students or people who just finished their studies and have just started as professionals, and they are more interested in a 3-room apartment than a 5-room apartment.
Yeah.
So there is this financial issue as well, where it's about finding people who are willing to pay for apartments in a place like Gellerup.
Because it does have a bad reputation associated.
It does.
Do you think this is like justifiable?
I think
because you lived here.
Yeah,
so.
yeah, I think it's too much. But of course, there are some things that have happened in Gellerup over time, which have caused the bad reputation. And currently, there was a conflict between a group from here and a group from Viby, with a lot of insecurity about it. And there's a whole traffic thing. A lot of people drive quite fast in cars out here, and there's been some issues, of course, where young people have been involved in like narcotics crime and other types of crime as well. So there definitely have been issues here that have caused some insecurity for some people. Yeah. But I think most people here live calm and quiet lives and are not normally bothered by these things, and a lot of people are very happy about living here. And that was also part of what I found when I was interviewing people here doing my PhD work, was that I actually found a surprisingly lot of people who were very happy about living in Gellerup and who had lived here for like 10, 20, 30 years and didn't want to leave. And also found students who would like to stay here after they finish their studies. But of course, a lot of students are passing through because maybe they will have to move to another city, or maybe they move in with a girlfriend or boyfriend and get married, have children. So it's temporary for a lot of students. But a lot of the people who maybe accidentally ended up here at some point, who've got an apartment here because it was the only place, it was an available apartment at the time, or something that was affordable to them. Yeah. They actually, some of them at least, fell in love with the place and have enjoyed living here. And also because Gellerup is a very special place in many ways. It's also a place where a lot of things are happening, and there's a lot of different cultures, there's a lot of different activities going on. And I think a lot of people are also attracted to that. Other people would just like to have their own garden and peace and quiet. Yeah. And that's also fine, of course. But Gellerup is not that kind of place, I think. So it's. But
there's also a plan to build houses, also besides apartments.
Like terrace houses. Yeah. So they will be built at some point. I'm not sure the market is ready for it yet, and I think the people who will be building them are waiting for the right time.
Okay. I was going to ask, like, why is this process taking so long?
Yeah. Well, I think there are many answers to that, but one of them is, of course, that there is a time plan, and you try to time the development of everything so that it kind of fits together. Like they're planning for a new school up here to be built in 2025 or 26. And the idea is you don't want to build the school too early because you want the social mixing to have gone through before you start the new school.
Okay.
So after when you have a more mixed group of residents, then it's easier to get the resourceful parents to bring their kids to the local school. Okay. Because what's happening now is if a lot of people who've moved here with kids, they put the kids in other schools than the local schools, because the local schools have had
But there
a bad
are
reputation.
schools here.
There's a school, we'll see if we make it all the way up there, but the school I went to is about 1.5 kilometers from here. And there used to be a school right over there.
Okay. Is there a kindergarten after the one was burned down?
Yeah, because this is actually a whole new children's
area
facilities complex. But that used to be Norgårdsskolen. Used to be there, and that was one of the first buildings that was demolished when they started working on the whole comprehensive plan, or the master plan.
So in which stage is the comprehensive plan now?
Well, that's kind of it's difficult to say whether it's halfway through or whether, but it's getting somewhere. So when I started my PhD, very little had happened, and we can talk about that when we move through this place. But you can actually see this more or less looks like it did before what we're seeing right now.
So this area basically...
This area looks very much like it's always looked. But when we move up here, we're going to see the changes quite soon. And of course, when you look over there, you see some of the changes as well. But when we move through the park, then maybe we should go up there.
Yeah. Okay, so there's kind of a clear line where the older buildings are and the newer ones are.
Some places it's mixed, but it's still some of the old buildings are still clustered on that side up behind, like the one with the green.
So that one is an old building?
That's an old building.
Okay.
And it hasn't been renovated.
Okay. And why is that? I also read something about people feeling like the houses had not been taken care of properly since the 60s.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of debate about that. I think many of the residents feel that there haven't been put enough money into maintaining the buildings. But that has also been because the housing association has been under a lot of financial pressure.
Okay.
So they've been losing money on Gellerup because it's been difficult for them to let out all the apartments. And that also means that you don't have the surplus that you can then reinvest in this thing.
So this is, do you know from which year this building is? Because this is one from the new ones.
No, it's an old one.
This is one of the old ones.
Renovated. So it's been inside. They've been restoring the apartments.
Okay.
So it's been it's been refurbished basically.
Okay.
There's also been some people who are not completely happy about the way that's been done, but everything has been like refurbished and made up to date. But there's still some discussion about the quality of the refurbishments. But
because that was the goal, right?
Yeah.
Affordable and quality.
Affordable and good quality.
Yes.
But I think there are some, especially if you ask architects about all this, the way that the buildings are facing east-west, most of them. And if you look at the line of the building, you can see that none of them are like shadowing each other. You can see it from here. Like if you look at these three large blocks here, none of them are shadowing each other. And they're so relatively far apart that you can't look into other people's apartments.
Okay.
So there are some qualities in the design that are actually still working, even though the apartments are old, because there's a lot of light coming in both in the morning and the afternoon. And most of the apartments are quite spacious as well, so they actually still feel nice if they've been kept well.
Okay.
So there's a lot of qualities in the buildings, and also actually if you talk to architects, modern day architects, a lot of them actually also like the design of the buildings, the way that they placed them in the landscape. But of course, there's a lot of things that are not up to date, so to speak, in the old buildings. Okay. This is another example over here. Actually, if you see, this is one of like the selling points of the new Gellerup.
Okay.
This is gate. Before it was.
So this is where it starts, like, basically.
Yeah. So it's called like the city gate.
Okay.
And it's a hole that's carved through the block. So you can see that block was like all the other ones here before.
Okay.
But now there's this hole through it. And that was one of the first, I think it was the first block actually, they started renovating.
Okay.
So they were like the testing block for the renovations. And they tried making like penthouse apartments in the middle.
Okay.
And it's also because it's facing the ring road out here, so it's also very visible to the rest of the city. Because otherwise, Gellerup is a bit like a fort. So there's these tall buildings around an area in the middle. So a lot of people only pass by on the outside and they don't go in, which is also part of what the master plan or the comprehensive plan is attempting to change. What you see here, these roads were not here before.
The main roads?
Yeah, the main roads. There was no roads here.
Yeah, you mentioned there was no traffic.
No, there was only like a footpath or a bicycle path going through the estate.
Okay.
So where that road is basically where the path was, going up there and going behind here. Okay. So this whole layout of the infrastructure is new as well, and the point of that is that the criticism of the old Gellerup was that it was closing in around itself. So it was actually what the architect planned. It was like a place where people would stay and spend most of their time. But that was problematic because they spent it in a different way from what society expected from them, so to speak. So this idea of creating roads through the estate is part of opening up the estate, so that you get people who do not live here passing through. You get eyes on the street, so to speak, which is kind of a way of thinking about security and thinking about safety. There's a lot of lights, as you can see here. Before the park was very dark, all of this is lights, quite powerful lights. So it's also about creating a different atmosphere where people are supposed to feel more safe. Of course, there's also some issues with traffic, because when you have motorized traffic going through, the kids might run into the road instead of just being in a park area. So, but let's walk to the park.
Yes.
Now it's red light.
Okay, we can wait a little bit. I will click. And I also wanted to ask, like, is this part like finished? Like, is there some parts of Gellerup that are considered finished, kind of?
Completely finished. As you can see, there's this spare spot, which is a place that's likely where something will be built, most likely. Okay. And I think that they will also do something to the park areas in between, so it's not completely finished. So there's still a lot of work to do, also on the buildings. Here. I think this one and that one are done, but I don't think those other two ones are. So so there's also still a lot of work on refurbishments. But this part we'll be entering now is finished.
Okay.
Well, not that.
Let's ignore.
This part, which is the park area, which is now very differently landscaped than it was before. Before it was a lot of lawns with grass and then some bushes, and some trees.
Was it like more flat? Did they change the?
Yeah, they actually changed it. So they kind of moved these piles of earth around, amounts of earth, like shaping it in a different way. Okay. And I think it's very nice. It's a nice park area today, and it's more really more interesting to pass through than the previous one was, where it was just grass and so on. And part of what the residents really wanted to keep were these huts you see over here. It's like places where you can barbecue and meet. That is quite nice. And that kind of stuff. So that was one of the wishes from the residents, that these things should be kept. Okay, so were they involved in the plan somehow? Somewhat in the plans, yeah.
That was it for today. Thank you so much for staying with us. See you next time.